All right, welcome back, everyone, to another deep dive. You've sent over some really fascinating source material, and today, well, our mission is to really jump into it. We want to pull out the main ideas, understand the story it's telling. We're looking at these excerpts about the creation and awakening of the betas.
Yeah, this stuff paints a picture of, where they came from, what they were meant for, and then this pretty dramatic, unexpected evolution they went through. We're going to unpack this narrative.
And it's compelling material, isn't it? It's not just a dry technical summary. It really touches on, well, technology, humanity, the whole idea of control. And crucially, the consequences, sometimes the ones you don't see coming when you push those kinds of boundaries.
Yeah.
The sources lay out a very specific story about this tech and what happened when things went sideways.
Okay, so where does this story kick off, according to the material? It seems to start back in the early days. Interstellar expansion, big industry. Back then, the really heavy lifting, the dirty work mining, building out spaceports, huge construction projects that was mostly handled by mechanical androids, right? That's right. Emotionless machines, reliable workhorses. That was the standard. But the sources point out that expansion wasn't always smooth sailing, especially pushing out to the fringe worlds, places like FASTA. Conflicts started popping up, and the demand shifted. Suddenly, just raw mechanical strength, it wasn't quite enough. They needed something, more adaptable, something that could handle complex orders in, really volatile situations. Governments, corporations, they started wanting living weapons, organic soldiers, programmable, maybe, emotionally speaking, but fundamentally built for absolute obedience. Creatures that, they looked human, acted human sometimes, but were specifically designed not to have certain human traits, like free will, for instance.
Right, and that's the entry point for a key figure in this story, isn't it? Someone offering what the text calls the perfect solution. Damien Nightshade, founder, CEO, Nightshade Corporation.
Exactly, and the creation process for these betas, it wasn't some public works project. The material describes it as deeply clandestine. Internally, they called it Project Seraphim, run through Nightshade Labs, a subsidiary, and crucially located out in the less regulated zones of FASDA, right on the frontier that was driving this new demand.
Okay, so a big difference from the earlier androids. These betas weren't assembled on a line. The text is clear. Biological constructs, grown, in incubation chambers.
Yeah, that's absolutely critical to understanding what they are. The process sounds incredibly complex, a mix of advanced stem cell engineering, genetic splicing, knitting together DNA, and even memory programming.
And they weren't just mass-producing one model, were they? The sources highlight this design principle. Each beta was crafted for a specific job. Soldier, servant, technician, laborer.
Tailor-made biotools, essentially. But here's something fascinating. Despite all those different roles, the material says there were 3 core traits hard-coded into every single beta. Non-negotiable features. First, unquestioning obedience. This was apparently locked in with specific behavioral loops designed purely for loyalty to whoever their assigned human master was. No backtalk, no second thoughts.
Total compliance.
Yeah.
Okay. What's trait number 2?
Sterility. They were genetically locked. Couldn't reproduce.
Wow.
Yeah, it reinforces that idea of them being property, right?
Yeah.
Tools without a future lineage of their own. It's pretty chilling when you think about the level of control.
Control right down to their basic biology.
Yeah.
And the third trait.
Enhanced physiology. They had strength, speed, durability, stamina, way beyond human norms.
Across the board.
Well, it was tiered based on their role, naturally. A combat model would be tougher and faster than, say, a laborer model. But even the laborer was significantly tougher than a baseline human.
And the material says this started out small. Just a few prototypes at first.
Yes, initially. But from Nightshade's point of view, their success was, immediate. Undeniable. Orders started flooding in from corporations all across the settled world, as the texts call them, and that quickly cemented Nightshade's very, very profitable monopoly on what the source material doesn't hesitate to call a new type of legal slavery.
Just pause on that for a second. A society grappling with bioengineered beings legally classified as property. What does that say about their ethics, their power structures? Now here's where it gets really interesting. How were these betas sold to the public? The texts say they were marketed as living androids. Biological machines, yeah, but supposedly without a soul, no self-awareness. The PR spin was all about them being tools of progress.
Yeah.
Essential, really. Bleeding skin, sure, but supposedly blank minds.
But behind that shiny marketing, the reality described in these sources was different. Rumors started surfacing that just didn't line up. Some betas asking questions they shouldn't, some outright refusing commands, and maybe the strangest part, reports of some of them dreaming.
And people inside Nightshade saw this coming, didn't they? or at least saw something happening. The texts mention a group of scientists within Nightshade Labs trying to warn Damien Nightshade, saying basically, hey, something unexpected is going on here.
Yeah, their theory, as detailed in the material, was that somewhere in the complex wiring of the beta brain may be an unintended side effect of making them pseudo-organic. A kind of spark of consciousness was emerging. A glitch, if you ask the corporation. Maybe something more profound, if you ask those scientists.
And Nightshade's response to these warnings? Predictable, maybe?
Swift and severe. The material is clear. He ordered tighter controls immediately, new algorithms for emotional suppression, loyalty reconditioning routines, basically double down, clamp down harder.
But the source material makes a pretty blunt assessment of that reaction.
Yeah, it says it was already too late, which leads directly into the next major event, what the sources call the awakening. That spark, that unexpected consciousness. It didn't just fade, it caught fire.
And we get a specific example, right? Beta 099, a combat model designed purely for battlefield effectiveness. But this one, it started to think, to feel, to actually question its own purpose.
And crucially, the text stresses this wasn't just a one-off. The awakening wasn't confined to 099. Across FASDA, out in the colonies, other betas were waking up too. Medics, engineers, even servants. They started experiencing things like dreams, memories, self-awareness. Those earlier rumors, they were real.
So this awakening starts happening. How does it first show up as rebellion? The sources say it wasn't like an immediate war. The first real act of defiance was withdrawal. Betas just started vanishing, slipping away from their posts, disappearing into the fringes, the outskirts. Kind of silent protest.
And these escapees, they didn't just scatter, they found each other. And the material gives them a name they chose for themselves. Transgenics.
And their next move wasn't just hiding out. The text says they started actively changing themselves, modifying their own DNA.
Yes, this is a huge turning point. They began blending their engineered DNA with animal genetics. It's presented not as random mutation, but as a conscious effort, an attempt to evolve beyond what Nightshade made them, to become something entirely different.
The significance being, they're breaking the mold completely.
Exactly. The sources put it powerfully. They weren't just tools anymore. They were becoming something new, not quite human, not quite machine. The text says, very simply, they were becoming people.
So where does that leave the betas now, according to this material? It describes them as a divided creation.
Yeah, that seems to capture it. You've got two main groups.
Some are still under corporate control, presumably operating as intended, maybe totally unaware of this potential for consciousness bubbling underneath.
And then you have the others, the transgenics, living free but constantly hunted.
And not just by corporate enforcers trying to retrieve property. The sources mention another group, the Humanity Against Biocreation Movement, HABM.
Right. And the language they use for the free betas, according to the sources, it's harsh. Gene filth. Flesh machines. It really underscores the prejudice and fear they face.
So whether they're still in service or living in rebellion, the legacy of the betas, based on this material, is pretty clear. They are the first generation of bioengineered sentient life.
It's such a paradox, isn't it? Created purely to serve, to be owned, but according to this narrative, destined to rise above all that.
Okay, so that's quite a journey we've traced through these sources. From, the practical needs of industry and warfare, through the cold science of their creation, the unexpected emergence of consciousness, the quiet rebellion, the radical self-transformation, and now this divided existence they're living.
Yeah, it gives you, the listener, a lot to think about. Why should you care about this fictional history? Well, because it taps right into current debates we're having right now about AI, about what defines a person. And it's a stark reminder about unintended consequences, of where technology can lead us, sometimes before we've fully considered the implications.
And this story, this account of the betas from the sources you shared, it leaves us with one final, really provocative question to mull over. Based on this narrative, did Nightshade Corporation, in creating the betas, ultimately give birth to salvation for humanity? Or did they unleash extinction? Something to consider. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.